Today, we're going to be talking about Kendra Hilty, a woman who somehow managed to turn falling in love with her psychiatrist into a full-blown internet series. Shockingly, it all started with a few short videos that ended up pulling millions of views and causing non-stop conversation. In her own words, she says this psychiatrist kept treating her even after knowing her feelings, a move she claims crossed professional lines.
So this is when the chemistry really started going off the charts with me and my psychiatrist, and I held it alone for months.
Now that her story has blown up, some people see her as exposing a serious boundary issue, and others accuse her of chasing clout. Either way, Kendra has put herself and her psychiatrist under a spotlight that won't be fading anytime soon. Meanwhile, if you don't know what's going on, we'll break down the entire drama, from the weird claims to the supposed evidence and some moments that would make you question whether this is a genuine story or just one big performance. And it only makes sense to start where this all began. This takes us to her TikTok account, where, as you can see, she positions herself as a voice for empowering ADHDers with over 130,000 followers. And I must mention, before gaining such a massive audience, she was known for posting videos like this. And it wasn't until August 1st where she posted this very video.
So this is when the chemistry really started going off the charts with me and my psychiatrist, and I held it alone for months, like after that Christmas morning appointment of his, and then after I innocently told him about my date with the therapist. He really started letting me in more and showing more parts of himself and, you know, turning up the intimacy.
And as you can see, this was the launch point for this whole drama. And it's the clip that pulled so many people into the story. So before anything, Kendra frames her experience around falling in love with her psychiatrist. And let's be real, that concept alone is a strange, weird case. But the thing is, developing feelings for a therapist or a psychiatrist isn't as strange as it sounds. In fact, there's even a psychological term for it called transference. Transference. And naturally, whenever you're sitting with someone week after week, expressing all your most vulnerable moments, emotions can spring out of nowhere. It's human nature. The difference is mental health professionals are trained to recognize when that happens and guide the situation without letting boundaries get in the way. But here's where things get messy. Kendra thought it would be a good idea to gaslight her audience about how the male gender uses their position as a therapist for predatory purposes.
I would really like to discuss what happens when we fall in love with our mental health professionals, and most importantly, the fact that there are so many people, especially men, that are emotionally dead inside, that feel called to going into psychiatry and therapy so they don't have to feel their feelings, but they can feed off of the vulnerability of their mostly female patients.
It's one thing to talk about a personal experience with a therapist, and it's another thing to accuse an entire gender of a profession in the worst possible way. And dealing with people on a daily basis, helping them get through their trauma and listening to a lot of really terrible stories, therapy and psychiatry isn't an easy field to walk into. It's a field that requires you to work in a world of ambiguity. And unlike most people who instinctively attach meaning to their thoughts and perceptions throughout the day, they must pause and question those assumptions. So when I hear sweeping claims about men entering the profession with bad intentions, I find that not only unfair, but dangerous. If you think about it, therapy already carries a stigma. Access is limited and people often hesitate to seek help in the first place. Now imagine discouraging people from trusting these professionals because they are men. What happens is that fewer people get help, barriers increase, and stigma continues. And that's not the kind of message that helps anyone. Sure, there are bad actors in every field, and therapy is no exception, but writing off entire groups isn't the answer. Before I go any further, a quick shout out to the sponsor of today's video. You ever keep putting off a doctor's appointment way longer than you should, like I did recently? Partly because I didn't really even know where to start. The idea of calling around, sitting on hold, wondering if the doctor even takes my insurance, it was enough to push it off again and again. It just felt a lot more difficult than it needed to be, and I didn't want to exert the effort. But then I hit that moment where I know that I can't keep delaying it. And for example, I deal with a itching issue, psoriasis. A lot of people out there probably have it, but the doctors can never figure out what it is. And because of that, it sends me into depression sometimes. And I don't say that to make anybody out there feel bad for me. I'm just stating the truth here. I get it here in my nose. You might notice some redness sometimes. I get it in my ears, and it makes it to where I can't sleep. And then it makes it difficult for me to really want to do anything and to get out there or to even make videos. And that's why it takes me so long to make videos sometimes. And so I just don't feel like going out or going to the doctor or going to appointments at all. And that's why I decided to try today's video sponsor, ZocDoc. And honestly, it's made the whole process a lot easier. ZocDoc is a free website where you can search and compare high quality in-network doctors. Choose the right one for your needs and instantly click to book an appointment. From mental health to dentistry, eye care, skin care, and everything in between, ZocDoc makes it easy to book in-network appointments with more than 100,000 healthcare providers. With ZocDoc, you can filter for doctors by insurance, location, and specialties, and see reviews by verified patients so you choose the best, most convenient care for you. When you've found the doctor you actually need, you can see their actual appointment openings, to which you just choose a time that works for you and instantly book a visit with just a few clicks. Plus, ZocDoc helps you get appointments fast, typically within 24 to 72 hours of booking, and you can even score same-day appointments. No need to call doctor's offices and wait on hold either. ZocDoc lets you do everything online, so that way you can quickly make an appointment and get on with your day. So don't put it off like I did. Be kind to yourself this year and go to ZocDoc.com/ChazKirschman. It's also the first link in my description. To find and instantly book a top-rated and in-network doctor today, that's ZocDoc.com/ChazKirschman. Thank you so much, ZocDoc, for sponsoring us. Now let's get into the video. Now, circling back to Kendra's video, this is where she begins describing her psychiatrist as someone who enjoyed her feelings for him.
Yes, I told him often that I had a crush on him, told him all the time that I thought he was attractive, and he just would smile and not say anything because he was the king of plausible deniability. He didn't ever ask me if I had a crush on him, but he didn't do anything when I told him.
At this point, it's unclear what kind of reaction she expected from him, but after someone directly asked if he seemed to enjoy it, I thought she might be getting onto something.
Oh, he wasn't just fine with me having a crush on him and being in love with him. He loved it. And he had every ethical duty to end the psychiatric relationship when he found out that I had a crush on him, but he kept me for years after. And this is what I mean. He was a 38-year-old, attractive, smart, extremely successful psychiatrist, but he did not date. Why didn't he date? Because he got his emotional needs met feeding off of his patients and getting fantasy supply from them and being seen by them. I'm really good at seeing people. He loved the way I saw him. It is a crazy story, and I can't wait to share it.
And to be honest, those are some serious accusations. But at this stage, they come across as more as assumptions than actual evidence. Was he truly encouraging it, or was she just interpreting neutrality as validation? That alone matters. And right now, there isn't enough clarity to draw any big conclusions. But here's the other sticking point. In the next video, Kendra insists that the psychiatrist should have transferred out the moment those feelings were on the table.
Sorry, but what did you want him to do? Get rid of you as a patient? Yes, that's what they're taught in psychiatric training, is that the moment that there is romantic feelings, it is on them to transfer that patient out. Without a doubt. He was the one with the medical degree. He was the one that knew better, but he loved the attention that I gave him too much to do the right thing. So yes, that's what I wanted him to do. The ethical thing.
Now here's where things get quite tricky. I think if a patient confesses romantic feelings and the professional immediately refers them out, that can feel like rejection or even abandonment. And for someone struggling, that kind of sudden cutoff can do real damage. And on the other hand, keeping a patient after those feelings are out in the open requires clear and careful boundaries. And if those boundaries aren't maintained, things can get out of control. And that's what makes Kendra's story a center of controversy, because she's not just sharing a personal personal experience. She's pointing at the very heart of an ethical situation in mental health care. And whether you see her narrative as proof of misconduct or just one side of a very complicated dynamic, it's clear there is a lot more than one viral confession.
Was I going through something psychologically? Let me be perfectly clear here. Even if I was going through something psychologically, it was on my psychiatrist to do something about it because he was the one with the ethical training and the psychiatric knowledge. So to answer your question, no. I was not going through something. I was simply wanting to go back on ADHD meds.
At this point, the problem here isn't that boundaries are being discussed, it's how confidently these claims are being broadcasted to millions of people online, even when the details are still not clear enough. Meanwhile, we are left with accusations that may or may not be substantiated, a line between personal perception and professional responsibility, and an internet audience ready to pick sides without all the facts. It only gets crazier when she claims the psychiatrist used her ADHD with trauma to somehow weaponize an attachment bond.
And I told him in my intake about some of the family stress that I had went through, relational stress, and he also diagnosed me with not only ADHD, but other trauma, stressor related disorders. He did not tell me about that diagnosis until I asked him a year and a half later. But what he did with that diagnosis was he used it to recreate attachment bonds and make me addicted to him.
Apart from the fact that this is hilarious, the way it's described almost makes it sound like some kind of comic book villain plot. Without concrete evidence, though, it's hard to buy into. And from the outside, this sounds like therapy being displayed as manipulation, at least for now. And it's quite ironic how she pulls off with one statement in one video and contradicts herself in the next. Even after she claimed that he was taking advantage of her vulnerability, she said in the next video that he truly had feelings for her.
Okay, I don't know who you are, but you absolutely get it, because predatory psychiatrists who feed off of the emotions and vulnerabilities of their patients, like for a living, they absolutely do not ever intend to catch feelings. They do not intend to catch feelings. But my psychiatrist accidentally caught feelings for me and I know that he did because he started leaking at the end. He accidentally told me one time that he had countertransference. That was a big slip for him.
And what's even crazier is that she doubles down on that men become therapists just to gain access to vulnerability.
Yeah, I learned that through this experience, that many broken and wounded men are attracted to psychiatry when they're in med school because they learn that they have access to vulnerability, to extreme vulnerability that they themselves don't allow themselves to feel or access, but they can get it from their patients. So that's why they can do anything, but they go to psychiatry so they can feed off of the vulnerability of their patients and be the wounded healer instead of having to just face their own demons. Yeah, I will not be seeing another male psychiatrist again.
Now, honestly, is there any proof to this? Because a lot of people want to go into psychology because they're genuinely interested in the human mind and just want to help people. To assume bad intent across the board feels like a leap too far. Case in point, it's one thing to say some people misuse the position of trust, which is true in every profession, but saying that's why men become therapists, that's a whole different level of generalization. And about the idea that this psychiatrist didn't date because he got his emotional needs met from patient trauma. I mean, really? That sounds less like a professional and more like a cartoon villain. Unless someone's really unwell themselves, it's hard to imagine therapy being a replacement for a relationship that claims a tough sell without something to back it up. She's also said that she'll never see a male psychiatrist again, which is fair and understandable. If someone feels more comfortable with a female professional, that's absolutely valid. But her reason for not wanting a male psychiatrist is hilarious, especially after you see this video.
Yeah, he let me see him every month, even though I only had to see him every 3 months. This is what I mean. He loved attention from me. He didn't ever tell me, I only need to see you every 3 months.
I don't really see why these consistent appointments are a problem, and even if she did have a problem, why didn't she just discuss it with him? And finally, she drops yet another video claiming that he didn't shut her down when she admitted to having a crush.
This is the hard part about this story, is that he was so good at plausible deniability. He was really smart and good at being a predator. He had been a psychiatrist for 12 years. So he didn't ever ask me to give him sexual content. I did that on my own. And he just let it happen, and he let me keep talking. He did not stop and redirect the conversation as a normal psychiatrist would have, right? Or an ethical one at least. And he also didn't stop me when I told him that I had a crush on him many times.
At this point, I think it's clear that Kendra has a problem of victimization. How does anyone keep bringing these subjects up on their own accord and expect their therapist to cut them off? Their job is to listen. If he had cut her off the second that she confessed, that could have easily made her feel punished for being honest. I guess the missing detail here is what happened after letting out her feelings. At the end of the day, a lot of what's been presented so far feels more like interpretation than hard evidence. And without clarity, it's hard not to see some of this as reaching. Even when a couple of people called her out for falling in love with him, she still found a way to victimize herself again.
I didn't mean to fall in love with my psychiatrist. He used things and trauma that I had went through in the past. He did his best to use that against me and to groom me to fall in love with him so I could give him content for his fantasy. Don't worry, I'll tell the whole story either later today or tomorrow.
Now, we don't have any idea what type of trauma Kendra might have went through, but to claim that her psychiatrist groomed her with this trauma is quite worrying. And that's not all. She even went as far as calling him a narcissist in some videos.
He also would make me feel crazy when I would try to name the dynamic and the tension that was there between us that he himself manufactured and built. And then he would rage at me and tell me that I was wrong. It's crazy, and I definitely will be on the lookout when I'm interacting with these people, for those tendencies.
At this point, based on all the videos she's uploaded so far, it was clear that there were loopholes and disconnections in some of the stories. So Kendra decided to create a series where she would discuss her journey right from the moment she started therapy to the moment it fell apart. It turned out she had quite a lot of issues managing ADHD, and she needed therapy to fix up.
I fell in love with my psychiatrist, and he knew, and he kept me until I had the strength to leave after 4 years. Here it is, part 1. So I decided to go back on ADHD meds after many years of being off of them. I was on them in my early 20s to help me get through college. And then I went off of them because they just weren't, the side effects were too much over the benefits. The biggest thing that I took away was that it's very important for ADHDers to be on meds. So I decided to make an appointment with a psychiatrist. I just Googled psychiatry in the city that I lived in, and I went with the first one that came up, and I got an appointment within a month. And then I booked a 90-minute intake, and I show up to the intake, and this man is my age, and I can't help but notice that he's pretty attractive, this psychiatrist.
So everyone would assume the story to be completely normal. I mean, there's nothing creepy so far, at least based on what she said. However, the next video is exactly where she brings up a problem, because this time she claimed the psychiatrist was never interested in listening to her.
I trusted him enough, of course, why wouldn't I, to tell him about my childhood trauma, my daddy issues, if you will, what I had went through, all of the relationship trauma that I had. I was 6 months sober at this time, but all of the drinking and substance use I used to do, and he just listened and nodded. And that's the thing about psychiatrists, is that they're good at pretending to listen. They can appear connected, but that doesn't mean that they're always connected.
At this point, her allegations are quite confusing. I mean, how do you know if someone is actually listening or pretending to be listening? Personally, I think what she just described was the most textbook therapy scenario imaginable. You know, where the therapist listens and the client talks. Nothing out of the ordinary and nothing sinister. It was in her next video that she claimed that the professional boundaries between them were beginning to blur.
And it was in my third session session with him, because at this point we were all on Zoom, that I asked him, I said, hey, do you mind if I call you by your first name? And he's Pakistani, so I said his first name wrong. And he said, well, it's pronounced this, but yes, of course you can. And he seemed so smug and happy with himself. And I know that that is because that was his first sign that him pretending like we're friends was working. And to be fair to me, I had only ever been to therapy before. I didn't realize that, it's important to call your doctor last name. I mean, I did know that. I did it with all my other doctors, but it just showed that the boundaries were blurring, and he liked that.
Now, come on, if you ask a friendly question, they're probably going to smile. I don't think that's some kind of master plan. I think that's just basic human politeness. At this point, it feels like she is reading sinister intent into every small gesture, and that makes it impossible for anyone to win in this situation. At some point, we have to ask, are we looking at genuine misconduct here, or are we taking every normal therapist reaction and turning it into evidence of a scheme? Well, based on her own videos, Kendra suggests that part of the reason she grew to respect her psychiatrist was because of the way he constantly highlighted, or as she put it, bragged about his professional success.
So I was seeing him every month and just gaining more and more respect for him, because he would just tell me these little things about his successes and all of the cool things that he was doing in his life. And it made me fall for him, honestly. And he was really good at listening.
Speaking of inconsistencies, Kendra criticized her psychiatrist for pretending to listen, and now she claims he's really good at listening because he's a Pisces. So which is it? Because those are two very different claims. And if the core of the story is simply, I fell in love with my psychiatrist and he kept me as a patient anyways, that by itself doesn't scream misconduct. It just sounds like a complicated but fairly common therapeutic situation. I mean, if someone sharing their success with you is all it takes to make you fall in love, then maybe the deeper issue is how quickly you attach to people. Also, based on what I've seen so far, the one thing she's failed to mention is her growing obsession with her psychiatrist. It got so serious that she had to get a new 75-year-old female therapist, whom she would spend more of her time with in order to just avoid seeing her psychiatrist regularly.
So I would beg him to let me see him every week. Beg him, because my therapist at the time, he was fine. He wasn't a predator, but he was fine. He just wasn't doing very much for me. And so that therapist retired and I got a new therapist. And this new therapist, who is a 75-year-old woman with a PhD, she was pretty helpful. So I stopped asking my psychiatrist, begging, honestly, to be my therapist and let me see him more, right? Which also should have been a red flag. But then I started focusing on this therapist. However, I would tell the therapist how obsessed I was with my psychiatrist, and she didn't do anything about it.
Now it's clear who was actually obsessed, at least based on her story. Meanwhile, Kendra still posted her regular series on TikTok addressing his consistent irregular behavior during therapy.
I got a new therapist. I stopped begging my psychiatrist to see me weekly. And that is when the intermittent reinforcement started. Some sessions he'd be warm and kind and wonderful and let me in on little parts of his life and be vulnerable with me or pretend. Other sessions he would be cold and clinical and detached. And you know what that did? It made me work harder in our next sessions. It did. And it started the addiction that I had to him. 100%. And he knew exactly what he was doing. This man gives lectures on trauma and attachment theory.
I don't understand how frustrating she must have felt, but I can tell that therapy isn't supposed to be like a coffee date every time. A good therapist knows when to soften and when to challenge you. That part of therapy is what makes it effective, not addictive. Now that we have reached the part where allegedly this man had feelings for her, let's strip the drama away and look at the actual claim.
After I risked my life to see him, that's when he really started turning up the intimacy in our appointments. However, he was really smart and knew the professional lines like the back of his hand. So he would comment on my appearance, but not compliment my appearance. So I would come on screen and he would say, "Oh, you curled your hair." Or I would come on screen and he would say, "Oh, you're wearing glasses." And of course I felt seen and excited that he was noticing these things about me. I didn't realize at this time that he had feelings for me too.
So from what she said in this video, I don't think it's a scandal, but basic human interaction. You know, therapists aren't robots. They aren't trained to sit there like mannequins, terrified from acknowledging that their patient looks different from week to week. I don't think that's crossing a boundary. That's just small talk. And yet in Kendra's retelling, these normal comments somehow became evidence that he secretly harbored feelings for her. And honestly, this is where the narrative starts wobbling, because if every comment or observation is rebranded as manipulation, then the standard for misconduct has basically dropped to zero. And I can't help but wonder if part of what's going on here is projection. That pretty much explains why Kendra and her friends think they would end up together.
And all this time, my best friend is an emergency medicine physician. And she told me, she said, "Kendra, one of these days, your psychiatrist," she would use his name, "is going to say, 'I can't be your doctor anymore. I want to be with you. I want to be with you so bad. I can't be your doctor. I'll see you in 2 years.'" So my best friend, who's a doctor, she picks up on stuff like that. So even she knew that our relationship was crossing boundaries and getting weird, but that became my dream, was for my psychiatrist, I almost use his name, to do that. And I told him about Brianna saying that, my best friend, who's the emergency medical doc. I told him that she would tell me that, and he just would be silent.
At this point, it became pretty clear that her psychiatrist had no interest in pursuing anything beyond a professional relationship. After all, his silence says a lot. What's equally as obvious, though, is just how much Kendra was overanalyzing every little detail. She even went as far as getting into another relationship, then brought the details of her sex life back into sessions with her psychiatrist, as if it would somehow change the dynamic between them.
January 2023, at this point, I was full-blown obsessed with my psychiatrist, and my therapist wasn't helping me. My psychiatrist wasn't helping me. He was feeding it. And then I got a boyfriend. And at first my psychiatrist wasn't really that keen, but then my psychiatrist realized that my boyfriend was a lot like my psychiatrist. And then I started talking to my psychiatrist about my sex life, about tracking my cycle, using the fertility awareness method. And my psychiatrist loved it. He didn't ever say, "This isn't inappropriate to your care, let's pivot." Oh, he just let me talk and talk and talk about my sex life.
While this might be inappropriate, therapy is literally the one place you are supposed to bring the most personal, unfiltered parts of your life. If that's what she felt she needed to unpack, then his job is to listen. So if anything, it sounds like him doing his job and not scheming behind the scenes. However, it was only a matter of time before Kendra broke up with her boyfriend for reasons that were related to the bedroom. Suddenly, she claims it wasn't just about sharing intimate details, but it's framed as grooming.
And I was still seeing him every month. Yeah, that was a rough time. And it was pretty much his Christmas morning, the almost 2.5 years of grooming me to get me to talk about sexual things with him worked. And he got 30 minutes of nonstop content to use.
Now that's a very serious accusation, and if we take a close look, where is the evidence for him grooming her? Where is the clear example of him saying something out of the line, pushing her toward a boundary he shouldn't? So far, everything described fits in the standard therapeutic dynamics. Without specifics, tossing out the word grooming doesn't just weaken her argument, it risks cheapening the meaning of the word itself. And when you take a step back and look at this, it's crazy how much little responsibility she actually places on herself. Meanwhile, the one obsessed person is her. And what's even more annoying is how angry she gets whenever someone highlights her insecurities in the comments, just like she did in this video.
Moment taken. It is so incredibly disturbing to me, the amount of people that are predator protectors in my comments that are victim blaming me, especially the mental health practitioners in my comments using therapy speak to say that this situation that I was in was my fault or that I was delusional. Check yourself. You're giving me more ammunition to share my story because it just goes to show how absolutely messed up the mental health industry is and how protected people who do this kind of sick psychological manipulation are. So I will continue with my story tomorrow. I will see you all then.
Now we've hit a point in the story where Kendra is furious at her critics, calling anyone who questions her story predatory defenders or victim blamers. Now that's heavy language and it deserves to be unpacked, because the moment you brand someone as a predator to millions of people, you are not just sharing your personal story anymore. You're making public accusations that can destroy a career, a reputation, and even a life. Even while there were numerous comments requesting for the name of the psychiatrist before she turned the comments off, it didn't take long before she doxed him out of nowhere. Now, it's not entirely clear if that was intentional or not, but what is clear is the damage it caused, especially now since his identity is in the open. At this point, this isn't some faceless, nameless figure. His real name, his face, and even his location are public knowledge now thanks to alleged slip-ups in a now deleted video. She accidentally revealed details, left them up, and before long, people put the pieces together. Tik Tok even had to step in to remove her posts. That's why it's so important to have actual evidence. Telling stories about someone anonymous is one thing. People can listen, empathize, or doubt without anyone's life being directly affected. But when a real person with a real name is attached, the burden of proof blows out of proportion. Without hard evidence, the whole story starts to look like reckless defamation. At the end of the day, Kendra may genuinely believe every word that she's saying.
So at this point in the story, there are two main players. My psychiatrist, who's my age, who crossed major ethical boundaries, and my therapist, who is a 75-year-old woman with a PhD. Neither of these people at this point in the story I knew were crossing boundaries. I thought that everything was hunky-dory and that I was just in love with my psychiatrist and it was totally normal. Little did I know he was manufacturing everything so I could fall in love with him, because it was on him to set the professional boundary and not let attention build.
Maybe in her heart, she's convinced she was wronged, but at this stage, it feels less like a story and more like a never-ending series designed to keep eyeballs glued. I mean, we're talking about 20 plus parts, each conveniently stretched to the 1 minute mark, so there's TikTok monetization. If this were really just about sharing a personal experience, why not make one solid, well-structured video and be done with it? Instead, we get cliffhanger after cliffhanger, each one promising the real shocking detail is just around the corner. Eventually, she went on and on talking about how he kept letting her in.
So this is when the chemistry really started going off the charts with me and my psychiatrist, and I held it alone for months, like after that Christmas morning appointment of his, and then after I innocently told him about my date with the therapist. He really started letting me in more and showing more parts of himself and, turning up the intimacy. And that was exciting to me, and it made me fall for him more.
Now, it's quite confusing what she wants exactly. In some of her videos, she doesn't sound too concerned about her psychiatrist being doxxed.
I'm here to share my story, not to get him in trouble. I did accidentally use his first name, but by the time I caught the slip, I was already like 3 videos past it. But it doesn't matter because this is my story and I can tell it the way that I want it. And a first name is not doxing.
Eventually, she decided to introduce an AI as a kind of sidekick therapist, especially since she no longer trusts her psychiatrist and 75-year-old therapist. She even personified ChatGPT, gave it a name, and started treating it like her second counselor.
And then I went home and I thought, wait a damn minute. Why would he mention that if he himself didn't have countertransference? So I went to Henry, of course, my ChatGPT, and asked for examples of how my psychiatrist might have countertransference for me. And remember, Henry at this point was being very protective. You know, he wasn't going to feed my delusions, me and my psychiatrist living happily ever after. So I screenshotted it, sent my psychiatrist an email with the subject line of countertransference, and emailed it to him within an hour of our appointment, where he made probably the biggest slip of his professional life.
It's beginning to look a lot like Kendra is doing too much. And here's the bigger issue. The psychiatrist isn't even really a villain in all of this. If anything, the pattern points to Kendra herself being a very challenging patient. And that's not meant as an insult, it's just an observation. The shifting stories, the exaggerations, the reliance on AI therapy, and the whole email thing, it paints a picture of someone struggling to find stability. Then there's the way she's handled criticism, especially from Black women content creators. It turns out a lot of them have called her out for how she has framed this whole situation, pointing out the real dynamics at play. And instead of engaging with those perspectives, she has began to block them left and right, allegedly.
It's time to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is the racial difference between me and my doctor. I have seen a lot of Black women on this app with the same take, and I need to say that Black women are the most important people on the planet to me, and that I have learned so much from Black women about how to be a better person and how to show up better in the world. They are the culture, and I am so grateful for them. Many Black women are seeing my story through the lens that I am a white woman who is taking advantage of my whiteness to wield power over my POC psychiatrist that didn't want me back, and so I am trying to get him fired. And that's okay.
Now, this is such a bad look, especially while she claims to admire Black women as the most important voices in the room. You can't call a group invaluable one minute and silence them the next when they disagree with you. It was at this point that she claimed she stopped visiting her therapist, but still had the intention of visiting her psychiatrist.
I decided that I was going to stop going to therapy. Besides spiraling about how obsessed I was with my psychiatrist every day, I really was doing very well in life. My business was going really well, and I had great friends and great support systems. And so I decided that I was going to end therapy.
It was in this video that we finally got a piece of hard evidence. An email from her 75-year-old therapist whom we still don't know much about.
From her saying that she needs me to come back in for one more session. I will put it up. And I got a huge emotional wave in that moment. I was like, what the heck is this? Like, we wrapped everything up. I had seen lots of therapists at this point, and I didn't ever have a therapist beg me to come back in for one more session. And I was so overwhelmed. I did not write her back, but it was extremely inappropriate.
And as you can see, Kendra frames it as her therapist begging her to come back. But when you actually look at the email, it's just a polite, professional follow-up. The email reads, "Hi Kendra, I am so thrilled for you as you prepare for your new adventure. Since I did not have advance notice of this being our last session, I was not prepared to provide what I believe is healthful closure. Usually we review your goals and see how we did, as well as look at how you've changed, in addition to discussing what you've learned, which we addressed somewhat today. Please consider having an additional session where we both are aware of making it to the best closure possible." So a simple "you're welcome to return if you would like another session" now appears to be extremely weird, according to Kendra. That's just standard protocol, nothing more. But yet Kendra spins it as some desperate plea, proof that they couldn't let her go. And this is why everything she has said so far is questionable. Kendra would go on to continue her TikTok series, after which she kept giving reasons why she thinks her psychiatrist should have dropped her, but he didn't.
So in that session, after the psychiatrist told me that he would refer patients to me if he could, if I wasn't already his patient, I asked him if he got my email and what he thought of my ChatGPT, of what he thought of Henry's response of countertransference. And the psychiatrist said, "Oh, I'm still thinking about what Henry said about countertransference." And I said, "Well, we talked about it a little more, and I want to read you something else." So I read the psychiatrist what Henry had to say more about it. When he told you countertransference is common, it might have been his way of normalizing the fact that providers aren't immune to feelings. It's part of being human. What matters is how well they keep those feelings in check, which the psychiatrist's name clearly excels at. And as you can imagine, the psychiatrist loved hearing that. He loved hearing that because my AI mirror was essentially just saying, yes, he has feelings for you, but he just keeps them in check so well. He's so good at his job, keeping his feelings in check.
Meanwhile, she even went as far as making him feel uncomfortable by telling him how she's been having dreams about him.
The last 2 videos and this video was all the same session in February of this year. The countertransference slip happened in January. How I decided to end this session was I looked at the psychiatrist and I said, a couple weeks ago on the full moon when I was ovulating, I had a dream about you. And he was like, "Oh yeah?" And I said, "Yeah." So I told him this. And I said, "Yes, we hooked up right here in this office." And he all of a sudden just looked so uncomfortable. He didn't say anything. He couldn't look at me. He couldn't breathe. And sure, maybe he was uncomfortable because he didn't like me saying that I had a dream where we hooked up, but he could have said that. But he didn't. You want to know why he was uncomfortable? Because he had probably played out that fantasy so many times in his head.
Honestly, the last thing she should want in that situation is a grin or a wink. And his discomfort should have been proof that he was staying professional and not evidence for some kind of secret romance. But instead of stopping when she saw him tense up, she just kept going. In my opinion, that's not boundary crossing on his part. That's him sitting through a situation that a textbook probably didn't prepare him for. Because let's face it, they don't exactly teach what to do when a patient says she dreamt about hooking up with you in the office. And honestly, it's beginning to look a lot less like he crossed some lines here, more like she's projecting onto him what she wants. The obsession, the resentment, even the little details all point to someone desperate for him to secretly feel the same way. What it really looks like is a bad mix of vulnerability, misplaced attraction, and he probably didn't give her what she wanted, so the narrative became, I wasn't in love, I was manipulated. But the lack of solid examples says otherwise. After some days, she still decided to email the therapist whom she claimed had inappropriate boundary issues.
So I go home kind of rattled, just like, wow, that was intense. And I decided to write the email to my therapist. I'll put it right here. The one who had begged me to come in for another session, who was also having inappropriate boundary crossings with me. And so I just told her, I was like, look, I understand it was sudden, but if I were to come back in, it'd be more for you than for me. And I'm happy to fill out a form, right? Here, give me a form to fill out for your notes. And then she said, it's a part of my clinical integrity to invite you back in, to put your needs above mine. Your clinical integrity? Yeah, I did not write her back. I did not write her back.
The email would read, I realized I did not give you prior notice that I intended for our therapeutic relationship to end. And I understand that endings are important. You have helped me so much, and this ending has been a long time coming in my head. The closure that we had yesterday felt adequate, and I left your house feeling happy and complete. If I came back for another session, it would be more for you than me. If it would help, I'd be happy to fill out a form if you would like to send me one. Thank you again for the positive transformation that you helped me in my life. I will forever be grateful. They would respond and say, hi, Kendra. Thanks for your warm response. So it's part of my clinical integrity to invite you in for a closure session after 2.5 years of work together. I understand that you're growing through other modalities now that I support and am excited about for you. Although my preference is to meet again and tie up my records with a pretty bow. I certainly honor and value your experience of completion, intending only the best for you as your life expands in untold miraculous ways. At the end of the day, this whole saga feels less about exposing misconduct and more about spinning the story that keeps the attention flowing. And while it's easy to get frustrated with her, it's clear that she's not in a healthy place herself, which makes this whole situation messy for everyone involved. Yet, even after everything, she kept posting videos admitting she couldn't get him out of her head.
There's an absolutely brilliant creator on here who did a psychoanalytical deep dive into my situation. And she said something that absolutely gripped me. She wrote, and I quote, "A clinician left the frame open and a patient spiraled inside of it." I don't think a better sentence could sum up what was going on at this point, because I was absolutely spiraling. People can say that I'm spiraling now, or that I'm manic, or that I have, whatever diagnosis all these armchair therapists want to give me. But let me tell you, I was spiraling that month after the February appointment. I just could not stop daydreaming about Psychiatrist. I could not stop daydreaming about being with him. I daydreamed about converting my religion so we could get married. And yeah, it was bad.
Now, I can only guess that the reason why she's releasing so many videos is because in hopes to go viral, because as you can see, her claims get crazier and crazier the more she posts. And I'm sure she didn't anticipate posting so many videos like she did. And there's no way the original plan for her was to stretch this story into 50 different episodes. It probably wasn't until the numbers started climbing and she started receiving clients that suddenly she was like, oh, I need to keep posting if I want to keep this happening. So suddenly the story couldn't end. There's a very real possibility that a lot of the parts of this story are very exaggerated and maybe even fabricated just to stretch things out. And not necessarily because she is sitting there scheming up lies, but because once you're knee deep in the attention machine, you start adding new twists just to keep it spinning. And honestly, that theory makes a lot more sense than believing that everything was 100% fabricated from the start. Meanwhile, Kendra comes up with a completely different reason why she wants to end her session with the psychiatrist. And this time, it's far from what you would expect.
I got this new insurance plan, and it was a great insurance plan. It just did not cover any mental health services. So who's the first person I call? The psychiatrist's office manager. She explained to me that it was going to be $187 to see him for his cash pay price, and I would have to see him once every 3 months. And it was in that moment that I decided that I was not going to pay to torture myself anymore.
So right when that number enters the picture, suddenly it's not about the dream or the spirals anymore. It's about not paying to torture herself. Maybe that's how she frames it, but to me, it sounds like the price tag finally hit too hard. The whole "he manipulated me" storyline just so happened to reach its breaking point the second she had to dig deeper into her wallet. And maybe that's the biggest tell of all, because if the obsession was as deep and consuming as she says, then why does money stop it cold? So Kendra decided to wrap up her session by compiling a dramatic monologue of her ChatGPT conversations to present to her final meeting with the psychiatrist. But just when you think the story is over, she gets hit with something unexpected, a friend request. And not from just anyone. This time, it's from her 75-year-old therapist.
Then I was ready the day before my final appointment, and I log into Facebook, and guess who I have a friend request from? The therapist, the 75-year-old PhD therapist, friend requested me on Facebook not even a month after I told her that I would not be coming back. I've heard some people say, oh, that was a really professional email that she sent you. I beg to differ, because it is extremely unprofessional after I say I will not be coming back to then friend request me on Facebook. That was jarring.
Now, this is actually weird if I'm being honest. It's not some earth-shattering scandal, but it's weird and incredibly unprofessional, especially since Kendra already stated she doesn't want to get therapy from her. No doubt the email they sent her before was still professional and fine. The friend request doesn't undo that. It just adds the awkward footnote that feels out of place. Maybe she doesn't totally grasp how crossing into a client's professional social looks in today's world, but that doesn't make it any less unprofessional. And even though she kept getting a Kendra started sending, quote, love and light to people doxing and harassing her.
Before I get into how the final session went, I just want to let everyone know that I am sending love and good vibes to all of the people who have been bullying me, who have been doxing me, who have been stalking me, quite honestly. I'm sending you love.
Now, that's quite surprising, but let's be real here. That's disgusting from whoever did that. Honestly, it's completely normal to not like somebody if they're making your life a complete hell. This is why her reaction is a little hard to swallow, considering not too long ago, she was in her car yelling at her phone, furious at anyone who dared call her delusional. She goes off on this whole tangent about blocking her ex on Instagram after he tried the classic Happy Valentine's Day text.
The next thing on my list was that my ex-boyfriend finally got blocked on text and IG after sending me a quote Happy Valentine's Day unquote text. And then I told him, I said, I immediately felt more energy after blocking him. And the psychiatrist was like, more energy.
That's quite surprising, but let's be real here. That is disgusting from whoever did that. And honestly, I think it's okay to not like somebody if they make your life a living hell. Meanwhile, she comes up with another video where she has a conversation with the psychiatrist about how he chooses whenever he wants her, but she doesn't get to choose.
So after I said, you set the boundary of us having a professional patient-doctor relationship, and after I accepted your boundary, you let me in and engaged deeper with me than ever before, but on your terms only, right? When I said ever before, he said, tell me the ways I let you in, but on your terms only. And then I said, I don't want to be in a space where you allow me to feel our connection and to see what's there beneath the surface, but you do not allow me to fully access it. He nodded. He went, like that was the whole game.
I don't think his reaction is a big deal. That's literally how therapy works. I mean, she's not dating the guy. He has a bunch of clients, most of whom probably aren't testing his patience with Instagram reels at the desk. Speaking of which, the next video shows how much of a hypocrite she actually is. In that video, she talked about the book titled White Women and how it changed her life.
In 2023, I read this book, and it absolutely changed my life. It was probably the best book I've read in years. And it's written by a Black woman and a South Asian woman. And I am so grateful for this book because it gave me the frame to see that as a white person, I benefit from white supremacy every single day. So I am constantly doing my best to understand better how my whiteness plays into power situations and how I can give more power to people who do not look like me. If you are a white woman, I cannot recommend this book enough. That being said,
now, a good look at the epigraph says everything you already know about your own racism and how to do better. And sure, maybe it did change her life, but from the way she talks about it, it comes across less like real reflection and more like one big virtue signal. I mean, this is the same woman that will say Black women are the culture, they're the most important people in the world to me, and it just sounds hollow. Because words don't actually erase the criticisms being thrown at her. I mean, that's not how accountability works. Meanwhile, the subs, the donations, and the gifts she's making on live is making her bank. And that raises the obvious question, if there is this much financial incentive to keep the story going, how are we supposed to know which parts are genuine spirals and which parts are just exaggerations designed to keep the cash flowing? When your audience is literally paying for the chaos, you have every reason to keep serving it up. It's even crazier when some of her fans started coming up with AI videos. At one point, some actually generated a little highlight reel of her and the psychiatrist doing the romantic QC stuff she wished had happened. Now, this is exactly the worst possible thing that you could put in front of someone like her, because instead of helping her detach from the fantasy, you're handing her a neatly packaged delusion. However, the wildest part is that she eats it up and turns on sub-only chat so the most loyal fans can enjoy the moment with her.
There was one that really got me.
And here you have this weird parasocial relationship where her audience is enabling her belief that her therapist is actually in love with her, playing into her fantasy of being in a relationship with this guy, which is strangely the same kind of dynamic she accused her psychiatrist of creating. And if you stop to think about it for a second, imagine how the therapist must be feeling right now about this story being spread about him. And then all of a sudden there's AI footage of him and his patient together. And of course she's going to do these type of live streams. I mean, look at how many donations are flying in and how many subs she has. She's making money from this.
And I'm finally caught up on DMs too. Hey child, good to see you. Is your AI guy fixed? He is. Yes. Maybe he'll come out today. But he is, you know, it's funny because like Claude went in one direction and was like, your haters are right, you need help. So I've been talking to therapists that are friends, so that doesn't really count. And I made a therapy appointment.
I don't know how much money she's making, but I'm assuming it's a pretty good bid if she's still posting till this day. And once you realize that she could possibly be doing this for the money, a lot of her choices begin to make sense. Anyways, that's where I'm going to leave it for now. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.